There's an activity today.
But if you wanna go.
Yeah. Look with your eyes.
It's like my old ones, they were, I wish I could. They were like kind of. I loved those, but they sound soon.
It's not on, I don't see Dave yet, we can begin at any time.
Okay, we ready? Call to order the February 11th work session to discuss the fiscal year 27 budget. This time if we can get a roll call here.
Present.
Here,
Yeah.
You have one.
We have a quorum. Hey, any guests? Welcome. Welcome. All right, Alex, do you want to share with us what the intent of this work session is, and then we'll go right into it.
Yep, so we've got about 6 documents, and these are the ones that we usually present at this time, kind of the administration's first swipe at expenditures and projected revenues for the next fiscal year, and it's really drafty. The documents, right? So we're getting in information and things are changing. There'll be a few things in that we don't quite know. And maybe I'll talk about those when we come to it. So Annie and I will kind of tag team the effort this next half hour, and hopefully we'll be able to answer all your questions if you have them. If not, I'll defer to Annie and she'll look back at me and we'll say we'll get back to you. But yeah, so she and I have kind of, built the budget based on some of what our knowns are and kind of what some of the anticipated things are. So again, really rough swipe at what we're going to be talking about. So that first document that we have, it's referred to the budget baseline, FY27 budget baseline. So this is the one that's again real high level, what our anticipated revenues might be, and then what we're thinking some of our projected expenditures are going to be. And I'll just kind of walk through. I don't know if you want me to do line by line, but I'll take a swipe at it and then go from there. The first line there, the city direct appropriation. So because we have different fiscal years, we don't quite know yet what the city's contribution in our spring of next year will look like. That will come when they pass their December of 2026. But what we do know is the first half of our fiscal year, right, is going to be the tail end of their current fiscal year. And that's about a $675,000 number. So if we look at some historical trend information, that spring number tends to be in the 1.2 to 3 to 4 million or so. So that's what we will be anticipating. And we'll make that ask a little bit later in the budget development process, closer to that May timeline, to really kind of after the property assessment comes in and we know what we use that to calculate what the minimum contribution can be and what the allowable maximum contribution will be. So that will, we'll go to them at that time once that assessment value is in property assessment and make our request for next year.
so that's that $2 million, the very first number.
Yeah.
Sort of.
So that's
That's
like a
just a
placeholder
placeholder.
based on
Right.
what we would anticipate the around number being. Could be a little bit more. I doubt that it would be any less, just based on some conversations that I'm having with city council folks. So yeah.
So their payment is always split between 2 years for us.
2 years for them. Right.
Well,
So-
we already have about 675,000 from what they last approved, right?
That will
So
be
go to the fall.
That'll be the fall pay, so that'll be the July to December
Yeah.
payment split. I mean, they pay monthly.
Mhm.
And so, and then there's the spring, like,
So that, yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be the end of their current fiscal year, and then that spring payment, that will come in their next fiscal.
those-
That's
But ours.
our one fiscal year.
So we're always, so like if they provide more or less to us, that just gets prorated along that second. fiscal- Yeah, second,
Yeah,
okay.
and one thing that Annie and I have been talking about recently is, gosh, it probably started happening about, at least 7 years ago. They requested to give us a little bit more money, like in the spring, because they maybe had a better projection, or that was the start of their fiscal year, so that they knew what their revenues were going to be. But before too long, it's going to become quite lopsided.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna have to work with them next year to make a plan to sort of rebalance the distribution into more of a 50-50.
Yeah.
Our fall, our spring, right? They're two different fiscal years, so.
That's what I was kind of wondering, because
Yeah.
this one's always gonna get smaller. And the spring is always going to get, need more, yeah,
Right.
okay. So
And
you guys
again,
are working on that
Yeah,
with them.
and we may get to a point where, their monthly contributions along with the state contributions, right? We get those monthly. We might be really close to, I don't wanna say not paying our bills, but we need that revenue to kind of be readjusted. So Annie and I are on that, they have conversations with, city manager and folks there, this spring. The in-kind contribution, remember that's not a dollar value, but it's a value, right? It's not cash, it's just a value, but we have to sort of count it as cash or as part of the maximum contribution. Earnings on investment, that's a typical number that we've seen over the past few years. Miscellaneous local revenue, shop fees, lab fees, student fees and things like that, facility rentals. We will have an additional, we didn't include it in this number, but NBE will be renting the facility this summer. And I'm in conversations right now to secure $85,000 as a revenue piece to that. So that will, once we have the ink signed on that contract, we can into our anticipated revenue. The foundation formula, the foundation program, that 4.8 million. So that is generated by that base student allocation formula. We use projected or anticipated student numbers to derive that, right? But again, we don't necessarily know what that true number is going to be until January or February of the current year, right? So like we just found out, back in January, what our allocation from the state was going to be for this year based on our student numbers. And then if it's higher or lower in a given year based on what we've projected, then the state makes adjustments typically in that spring allocation, right? So if they've overpaid in a sense in the fall, then they'll just readjust that.
So we give them a basic number to work with in the fall. And then it's actually corrected in January.
Yeah, so we actually do it the previous year. So we have to provide the state with two bits of information. In November of each year, I have to give what the projected numbers are for next school year so that the governor can build his budget for that. But there's also another report that I have to say, we anticipate this number of students at Long Eccles and at CHS and this number of intensives. And
That's that document you
Yeah.
always show us in.
And that's the number that they use to kind of project what the base student allocation or what the payment might be.
What, compared to this year, what what's your anticipated student count? Going down a little bit, going up a little bit?
No, so right now, our early indications are that there might not be as many kindergarteners coming in, next school year. We're anticipating 2022 versus 24 to 26, right at this point in time, so. I would venture to say that we're gonna be pretty close to what we were this year at, 365 or so. And that's within 5 or 6, that's about what we've been over the course of the last 6, 7 years or so.
Is there a bubble of kids that are growing? I keep wondering if it's gonna keep
Yeah.
going. Interesting.
COVID has certainly had an impact on, our brick and mortar numbers. Our correspondence school numbers grew exponentially, but then that also reduced our brick and mortar students. But I would.
Yes, because it seems to me 4 or 5 years ago, we had like 30 some kindergartners. We had 3 sessions, right?
Not 3 sessions, but we had fairly big numbers and we
There
had
was-
17 kids.
There's 2 classes plus an afternoon kindergarten.
Yeah,
So,
2 mornings and an afternoon, right?
Mhm. That was
There's like
2020,
36, 37
2022,
kids.
2023.
We're down quite a bit, few kindergartens from our high.
yeah. Yeah.
Alex,
Yeah.
not to belabor the student counts too much, but I just wanna make sure I'm getting those
Yeah.
counts. So in November, you do your projection and then the governor uses it for January, last month, his budget.
Mhm.
And then when they get the BSA number or whatever, that goes to next year. Or does it go retro to like this school year? This
Yeah.
school year.
So I send out 2 different reports. One is in September, right, where right before the October count starts. So the state says, what do you anticipate your numbers being this year? Right, so I send that in September. So that number is used for the current year. And then the November report that goes to deed, that number is used for next year's students, but for the governor's budget.
Okay, so what I was like, that just seems too far backwards, but okay, so it's for next year. Okay, I was like, yeah, okay,
Right.
good, okay, I'm good.
Alright, good. Yeah, so again, moving through that upper part there, TERS and PERS. Those tend to be pass-through dollars because we turn right back around and use those to pay down our PERS and TERS obligations.
Retirement.
Right, yeah, but we have to capture those as revenue. Impact aid, that is typically in the 35 to 42, $43,000 range. And what that is, those are federal funds that we receive. I wouldn't say in lieu of, but for students that live on federal or native land, or for students whose parents work on federal or native land, there's a formula that's used to then provide us with some revenue because it's non-taxable property that the city might otherwise be able to tax, and then that would sort of impact what the minimum and maximum contributions are, so that money just comes directly to the district. Yeah, so moving down to the expenditure list, maybe we can look at the next document as well, kind of together as I work my way down this. And the one I'm looking at is on page 8, the full-time equivalent by fund and location. So this really is what we anticipate our personnel being, and our personnel makes up about 85% of the district's budget. So that's quite a chunk of things, and I won't go through that line by line, but what I will say is that again, this is kind of, if money weren't an issue, here's what our budget might look like. And so I have included in this, or we've included in this, an additional grade 6 teacher for next year. And an additional teacher at the high school for next year. And potentially that would be likely in the area of math. And if, again, kind of depending on what the revenues look like and the expenditures, if there is an opportunity to add an additional staff, I would likely propose adding a second year to the junior senior high. We're gonna have a big influx of kids coming up from the elementary in the next 3 to 4, I mean, next year for sure, but you know, we can look down and see the next 3 to 4 years, we're gonna have some bigger numbers, which then is gonna kind of tip the scale to need some additional resources, some teachers over here. So we'll take a look at just kind of how things unfold and then make decisions from there. Most of the other staffing, as you kind of look through, is very consistent with what we have this year. And you can kind of see how those are broken down by teacher positions and aide positions. So if I kind of refer back to that baseline budget page, that first page that we looked at, you'll notice that the regular instruction, that 3.5 million and some change, that's what accounts for on the staffing page, like the regular instruction side of things. The regular instruction, we don't have it presented on here, but that also includes teacher supplies and materials and all of the resources and things that we would need as part of the regular instructional program. And then likewise, as we move down to special education, you can then go back and see that on that first page. Much of that is staffing and then resources that go along with the special education program as well.
Mr. Rustin, can I ask a question? I was looking on page 9, right, where you have the dollars on each one. And so I was looking at like general fund, pupil transportation, food service. So like 100, 205, 255, but those don't necessarily correspond with page 7 expenses. Because like 100, the 100 series does not have 7 million. So I was just wondering like how that translates.
Yeah, Annie's gonna take a stab at that one.
You're gonna send me a spreadsheet later, Annie?
I might have to.
Just in general, because I was just kind of looking at like subtotals where, and so,
Yeah, that one.
I mean, they're probably spread throughout just on a different, not on that account.
Yeah.
You'll
That's-
notice
yeah.
that like under the 100
Mhm.
on page 9, that's also going to include, and Annie, maybe make a note of that, like that's also special education services, like.
Which get pulled out onto a different line.
Right.
Yeah,
Like
gotcha.
in this particular.
Totally.
Report, right?
Yep.
And then these other ones on page 9, and we can probably jump right to that page unless you have questions on.
No, that's what I was just curious how they get spread out.
Yeah, and so, you know, the rest of those really, with the exception of maybe food service, are special funds, right? They're not part of the general fund, in terms of like the title grants and things. And so, you know, that's.
Well, am I correct that the general fund on page 9 even includes administration levels?
Right. Right. Yeah, so that one, that.
So it's misleading because of the number system.
Mhm.
On the one page is using a different number than, yeah.
So that, yeah, on page 9 there, that first list should, for all intents and purposes, maybe with the exception of food service, incorporate all of these other expenses or line items on page 8.
I just wanna make a comment, not needing an answer or anything, but I'm always, every time we come to this, I'm always surprised at the percentage of money that's allocated to special education. Because I mean, it per student allocation obviously is much greater. And I understand that a lot of that is tied up in classified positions.
Right.
Because there's only 3 teachers associated with that, where there's 25 teachers associated with general ed.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you know, for our special education population, so we have, you know, 68 students out of 365 that receive special education services. Not all of them are intensive, right? There's that special status of intensive, meaning they have higher needs, and generally that's where a bulk of our classified employees are kind of with students who are intensive that might need one-on-one aids or maybe a 2-to-1 ratio. And so we have probably 32 of the 68 students receives speech services, right? So based on what their IEPs indicate, are kind of dependent on how much time that they're working with the speech language pathologist aid that we have. So. But nonetheless, it's, you know, it's a significant, some might say disproportionate amount of funds that are sort of geared that way, but you know, that's what the students need, and that's what we're obligated to provide.
Thank you.
Right, any other questions or comments on 7, 8, or 9?
Oh, you know, how many, I just was wondering, how many teachers did we, is that, you know, when I was looking at the elementary school, the 16 and 9 at the high school, I don't know, I was kind of looking at it, how is that related to prior years? I don't know, I thought I had a chart here that I was looking at, that, does it, and I was seeing something or other about, higher numbers at the high school or something.
You'd probably have to look back probably 15 years ago when our student population was over 440, where it was more of a proportionate number of students at the elementary, students and teachers at the elementary as what was at the high school. There's for students, for teachers and students.
What do we have like this, this one is considering one more teacher at the high school, so is it,
So that would be,
we have 8 or something, is it?
no. So what we would be proposing is 14 at the elementary and 11 at the high school.
Oh,
With the addition of one teacher at each location.
14, okay.
We have 2 teachers that are half-time at each of the buildings. We have our music teacher and then our ESL teacher.
I have a question about the activities. Those are the 900s, right? And, with our, I just wanna be clear on the activities budget, these do on page 11. Those do not include the CHASA funds.
No,
And then do they include trips, no trips?
they include trips, so the way, I mean, again, this is, you know,
Mhm.
a dream
Yeah.
scenario. So it's based off of this year's participation and number of trips taken, including trips that were paid for by fundraise by CHASA fund. So
Okay,
it's, yeah, just
so it's
kind of
like,
like,
it's like restoring our activities
Yeah.
funding. And then, what are the other? Those numbers almost match, like we're about 630,000, and then the budget details had like 540, is that? Just administrative overheads?
what budget details are you talking about?
So but I'm matching everything up to page 7.
Okay, yeah,
And so you've got your breakdown on that,
That includes the food services as well.
Okay, so there's food
Yeah,
stuff that
yeah,
then also get there, okay, cool. And that's for meals. Is that?
No, that's the food services and this.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
yeah, that's
going
right,
off of,
okay,
like,
I
it's-
remember,
They're combined on that line
Uh-huh.
and not on the food services line
Yeah.
for. Whatever reason.
gotcha. And then food services is also, I mean, we've been full food service.
Yeah.
and- Okay,
And yeah, you'll notice on one of the pages regarding food service, so. You know, we anticipate some revenue from the summer food service program, so Sandy and her team have done a great job of recognizing and applying for, I can't, she would shoot me for not knowing the term. But basically, last year or this past summer, we were able to do a breakfast takeaway, as it were. And then.
non-congregate.
Thank you. Congregate and non-congregate. And so we anticipate being able to do that this summer as well. And, you know, that generated tens of thousands of dollars outside of what, you know, our expenses were. So that certainly helps the arching food service program throughout the year, what we can apply those funds for. And you'll notice on one of the documents, we would anticipate needing about 225,000 or so from the general fund to support the food service program. And, you know, one of, I'll try to tie this into budget, but one of my roles is to monitor the food service program and do these periodic site checks. And I go through a checklist of what it is that I'm looking for. And some of the feedback that I gave Sandy was that, you know, as I was here at the high school in particular, kids are like, why do I need this? Or why do I need that? Or I don't want to eat that. So I think she and Paul kind of made up a little flyer, a little infographic to really help students and parents understand the importance of, you know, part of the reason that we're eligible to have everybody have, you know, free breakfast and lunches is because, you know, one, our numbers, our migrant ed numbers support that. But also, when we continue to have good programs in place and good systems in place that make the meals reimbursable, that only benefits everybody in the district. And so the more reimbursable meals that we can get, the more that adds to the revenue that helps to support the overall food service program. And in part, free breakfast and lunch for any kid that wants it, so.
Okay, I'm looking at my clock. I see we have a couple more minutes and I don't know if we need a minute or two break or.
We had, I think the last page there was just a snapshot of the school board budget. And that was based on some of the conversations that we've had in past months about board training and the annual conference and kind of, you know, putting some placeholder numbers in there so that we could calculate potential expenses for the board. And again, this is kind of a first go round of this. So when we come back, probably in March, we'll suggest having another budget meeting. And we'll have better numbers, more details, right? We'll know a little bit more throughout the legislative session to see if any, you know, budgeting or base student allocation conversations are coming up, and kind of have a second go around at that. And so more detailed questions, more detailed information, and then maybe we can spend a little bit of time looking at the board's budget to see if we're under, over, are there other things that the board wants to consider adding to its budget, so.
And you know, when we do like the board budget, put in what we've spent this year, because it's always fascinating to see. And then also that I always worry about the reserve budget and how that's looking. Let's see if we capture that before you. At some, you know, I know it's hard to do.
I mean, I did I did a projected for, I'm learning how to figure that one out, but, for the end of the year. I just did that today, and we're coming in close to budget, like a little above budget, so that's where we're at right now.
Well-
It's off my.
Excellent, keep an eye on it. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, and
And I,
you know, maybe let my last comment, is that, you know, we're gonna be, starting up negotiations with the classified group, this Saturday. Valentine's Day is all my bloody Valentine. But,
it's gonna be all sweet.
no offense, Neil. No, so, you know, we would anticipate some additional, costs incurred, or expenditures that we would, add at the, if not March meeting, budget meeting, April's, right? But I think we'll get a pretty good sense of, even in our first meeting, kind of what some projected, increases to the budget may be from
And with permission, I'll hold board comments to the end of our regular board meeting. And at this time at 7 o'clock, I call this work session adjourned.